WHGE 95.3 FM coming up. The Open Eye.
Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence don't do so for the pleasure of mental masturbation or ego diddling. We do so because the chains of oppression on our people's minds are deep and difficult to remove.
Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM, the Advocacy Education Station. I'm your host, Third Eye Optometrist, Patrice Gibbs. And as we always tell you, every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. Here's some truth you need to know. My ancestors are not from the Middle East or Asia or North America or South America. My ancestors are strictly from Africa. I have no lineage with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Be clear on that. And let me get my disclaimer out the way. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye.
The views and opinions expressed on the Open Eye are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eye's hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual.
WHGE 95.3 FM. Open Eye. I always like to start off with a little history. Okay, got a lot to talk about today. A lot going on. All right. You know, Malcolm X claimed his alma mater were books. But if he was being more specific, I'm gonna say Pacific, y'all. If he was being more specific, he might have claimed his degree from the National Memorial African Bookstore in Harlem, New York. The store, which housed over 200,000 texts, operated for almost 40 years on the corner of what is now Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard and 125th Street. Malcolm X was just one of the store's frequent patrons, but he was clearly one of its most dedicated. He is reported to have spent entire days at the National Memorial African Bookstore. And when the owner, and on occasion, even stayed overnight. Other patrons include Kwame Nkrumah, W.B. Du Bois, who met his wife Shirley Graham there. Celebrities such as Joe Louis and Eartha Kitt and Louis Armstrong held autograph parties at the store. Just outside the storefront was an intersection affectionately dubbed Harlem Square, where speakers often preached black nationalism. Louis Michel, the owner, was himself a black nationalist and supported the various movements that were popular in Harlem between the 1930s and 1960s. Michel espoused Marcus Garvey's Back to Africa movement and stocked his business with all the necessary books for black political thought. History maker Charles Blossom happened upon the National Memorial African Bookstore as a young man and became another dedicated patron. On my way to the Schlumberg on 125th Street, I saw a sign, National Memorial Bookstore. So that's when I went in. And that's when I met Mr. Michel. And from that period, every other week, every couple of weeks, I would go to the bookstore. I met Langston Hughes there one day. One day he was coming in and Mr. Michel would call and say, allow me, Brother Blossom, from Philadelphia. So I lived outside Philadelphia and he said, Langston, come here. I want you to meet a collector, a friend of mine. So there I was, meeting Langston Hughes at the National Memorial African Bookstore. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. From Neil deGrasse, brother Jafar, I see you, brother. We just can't seem to break our addiction to the kinds of fuel that will bring back a climate last seen by the dinosaurs. A climate that will drown our coastal cities and wreak havoc on the environment and our ability to feed ourselves. All the while, the glorious sun pours immaculate free energy down upon us, more than we will ever need. Why can't we summon the ingenuity and courage of the generations that came before us? The dinosaurs never saw that asteroid coming. What's our excuse? Well, there's not an excuse, there's a reason. And that reason is our resources are controlled by a bunch of psychopaths. You know, it's foolish to let your oppressor tell you how you should feel and that you should forget about the oppression they inflicted on you. Hey, Dave, glad to see you here. What's up, Steve? I guarantee you that every person of color in this country has faced an indignity from the ridiculous to the grotesque to sometimes fatal. At some point in their, you know what, I'm going to say the last couple of hours, because of their skin color. Race is there, it is constant. You're tired of hearing about it? Imagine how damn exhausting it is living with it. It's actually a quote from Jon Stewart. You know, and with what's coming up, the election and this, that, and the other, we're going to see tons of misdirection over the next few months. Whatever you do not take your eyes off of Project 2025. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. Hey, Sharon. See you, sister. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM, Patrice Gibbs. One of the things that came out of Project 2025, part of the plan is to get rid of all federal employees and appoint those that are loyal to the Orange disaster. And what that made me think of was one of the worst presidents to sit in the White House. Yeah, we know how bad Trump was, but I have to wonder if he got inspiration from this fool. And that's President Woodrow Wilson. Wilson resegregated the federal workforce. That's the 2025 plan. MAGA, Make America Great Again. When was that? Now, the federal workforce, which had been integrated since Reconstruction, he resegregated it. And this move significantly set back civil rights for African Americans. There's something else he did. He screened the racist film, Birth of a Nation, in the White House, which glorified the Ku Klux Klan and depicted African Americans in a very negative light. And that's saying it. That's an understatement. Have you ever seen this film or any clips from it? And it's still held in film schools as one of the most innovative films ever. I remember Spike Lee, of course a student of film history, was told when the film was shown in one of his classes, don't look so much at the content, but look at the technique. Well, you can't ignore the content of this crap. Produced by D.W. Griffin. Now, Wilson wasn't just a racist, but he is a misogynist, because although he eventually supported the 19th Amendment, Wilson was vehemently opposed to women's suffrage, and he only changed his position under significant political pressure. His administration passed acts which severely curtailed free speech by making it a crime to criticize the government or the war effort during World War I. And this led to the arrest and imprisonment of many dissenters. Remember what Trump said, he's going to be a dictator for at least one day. And he's also telling his supporters, you got to get out and vote. Got to get out and vote. Because you only have to do it once. You won't have to worry about it again. Yeah. And like I said, Wilson ordered military interventions in Mexico, contributing to instability and resentment toward the United States in the region. And that's not all. During his administration, I'm pretty sure it was during his administration that America sent soldiers to Haiti and robbed them of their gold. Straight up robbed them. There was no, bringing democracy to Haiti and this, that, and the other. They just straight up robbed them. That's where one brother Al. And of course, Wilson, not unlike Trump, harbored anti-immigrant views and supported restrictive immigration laws for certain people. And Wilson supported eugenics. Now, eugenics is a belief in improving the genetic quality of the human population, which had deeply racist and ableist implications. His administration policies and personal beliefs reflected this disturbing ideology. This cat was, I said this cat was awful, man. It was absolutely awful. You want more of the same? and vote for the orange disaster. WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM, The Open Eye. Last week I got a call from a friend who asked me what I thought of Biden dropping out of the race and endorsing Kamala Harris to be the nominee for, the Democratic nominee for president. My initial reaction was, ooh, think we're effed. And this was before I had saw the reaction and the momentum that brought. And that announcement, she came right out with big momentum. Okay? And something else I noticed was the fear that overtook the Republicans. I mean, they showed themselves to be strictly afraid. You know, and they so crazy and dumb. Because when Biden dropped out of the race, one of the things they said, well, he obviously was not cognizant, was not fit to continue with the election, though he's obviously not fit to continue on as president. So not only did they call for him to drop out of the election, but they wanted him to resign from the presidency because they said he's not mentally fit at 80 years old or whatever. Like, they didn't think this through. They didn't think this through with the racist ass. Because if Biden resigns from the presidency, who's going to be the president? Kamala Harris, a black woman, which is the last thing in the world they actually want. Not only that, you know, they got all those t-shirts they run around wearing 47. Okay? Well, Kamala will be the 47th president if Biden resigns. Now, we know what happened when Obama was elected president. The white lash was off the hook, which gave rise to the orange disaster. See, this is why they're saying, you know, don't worry about it. Once I get in, you won't have it. Because the last thing in the world they ever want to see again is a black person sitting in the Oval Office. Okay? Now, I will tell you that I had some criticisms for Kamala Harris. And there's still people talking about her record as a prosecutor and attorney general in California and what have you. And I understand that. You know, now she allegedly was responsible for thousands of black men being locked up for marijuana in California and what have you. And some of us may have been misled. And because when I did some research, I found out that it wasn't thousands, it was 45. 45 black men. Okay? And yeah, let's look at her record. But let's look at Donald Trump's record. Because we want to look at the record of someone we're going to vote for. And of course, we remember when she was asked on one of the shows that, I think it was on the Breakfast Club or something, that was she going to do something specifically for black men? And this went around for quite a while. That she said, no. Okay. And I hear some black people say that, I'm not voting at all. Well, not voting at all is a vote for the orange disaster, basically. And like I said, let's look at Trump's record. This is a third-generation racist from a family of racism, whose grandfather did something so racist in racist-ass 1920 America that they locked his ass up. During the time when it was recreational to lynch black people, they locked his ass up because they said what he did was way out of line, even for these racists. Trump and his father were sued for the racism, for not allowing blacks to move in their buildings and what have you, to not rent their real estate. And let us not forget the Central Park Fives. Donald Trump took out full-page ads calling for their death. And even after they were proven innocent, he said, I don't believe it. I don't believe it, however he talks. And still call for their death. And I see these Republicans jumping up, talking about, you look at, I think it was Byron Donalds, a straight up Negro-pean idiot. Oh, you should have saw all the black people at the, you should have saw all the black people at the Republican convention compared to 20 years ago. We had black speakers, and we had Amber Rose, and we had, what's that fool's name? I can't think of his name because he doesn't matter to me too much. It wasn't another one of them black Republicans. Tim Scott, that's what I was trying to think of. Byron Donalds and this, that. Let me tell you something. Just because you put more raisins in the potato salad, don't make it flavorful. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. All right. Brother Abdul Latif reminded me of this. I keep an eye on Africa. France has the 4th largest gold reserves, some 2,000 tons, and name one single gold mine in France. Mali, which was occupied by France, does not have any gold reserves in its bank, although it has 860 gold mines and produces 50 tons per year. How France get all that gold? Yeah. How they get all that gold? Have you heard of The CFA franc is colonial currency that France prints for 14 African nations to which it applies seigniorage, and by virtue of it, exploits the resources of the nation. Okay? Burkina Faso, one of the poorest nations in the world. France prints colonial money for Burkina Faso. I think their new leader after the coup put a stop to that. In return, they demanded 50% of everything that Burkina Faso exports end up in the coffers of the French treasury. The gold that is mine, or was mine, by children, the extract mostly ends up in the coffers of the French state. So the solution is not to take the Africans and bring them to Europe. The solution is to free Africa from certain Europeans who exploit them. Okay, what is seigniorage? Seigniorage is the profit made by a government when it issues currency. It is simply the difference in the value of the currency versus the cost of producing it. For example, if a central government bank produces a bill worth $10, it only costs $5 to make it. There's a $5 seigniorage that goes to France. And they got a real slimy, oppressive, murderous history in Africa. Well, you know, for the French, it was cheaper to kill an enslaved African and wait on a new shipment to arrive than improve their living conditions. And over the course of 100 years, from 1680s to 1780s, over 1 million Africans were killed. They killed over 1 million people in the course of 100 years. Now remember, slavery started in Haiti in 1492, and at that time, Columbus and them killed over 8 million indigenous people. The death rate in Saint Dominique was ridiculous. In just 100 slavery years, they killed 1 million people, and thousands more were killed by suicide because they knew death was better than enslavement. And women, newly arrived African women, committed suicide at a higher rate than anybody else. Not only were they forced to work in the fields, but they were also subjected to the rape of their bodies, which were no longer their own. They were reduced to little more than a substitute for some white man's hand. You know what I mean? And those who were impregnated often didn't make it to full term. They either died during pregnancy, during birth, or they didn't deliver live births. My God, this is what the French did to African people. This just didn't happen in Haiti, but in every French colony around the world. That is their legacy. The legacy of the French. Their pastries and desserts that people love so much are the result of enslavement of African people. So when you see a disaster happen in France or in any colonizer country, remember this. Don't be too quick to salute the colonizer's flag because it's soaked with the blood of our people. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. Say her name. You know, say her name. I wonder if she knew about George Floyd. I heard her sister say that. I wonder if George Floyd knew about Trayvon Martin. See, it goes on and on. Because we know who they are. Say her name. Sonia Macy. You know, there's an unbroken line of police violence in the United States that takes us all the way back to the days of slavery. The aftermath of slavery, the development of the Ku Klux Klan. There's so much history of this racist violence that simply to bring one person to justice, it's not going to disturb the whole racist edifice. Say her name. Sonia Macy. You know, I'm sure by now most of you have heard the story of Miss Macy's murder. It's something that her son didn't learn of her death. Her son or her father learned of her death online. He learned what happened online. Now this cop who killed her is Grayson, and I said it last week. Sonia Macy's killer should likely never have been on the job in the first place. The heartbreaking and brutal killing on July 6th of the Springfield, Illinois mother, too, seems to get more devastating with each new set of details that's released. Late yesterday, ABC News reported that Sean Grayson, the former Sangamon County Sheriff's deputy who shot the 36-year-old unarmed black woman 3 times, with the final shot, his kill shot, fired right into her face, as if to completely obliterate her from ever having existed. He had a work history that was a warning. And the thing is, it's not an unusual detail in killer cop cases, but it always makes the pain worse. Sean Grayson was discharged from the Army in 2016 after having served a total of 1 year, 9 months, and 19 days. According to the U.S. Army, minimum service is 2 years, but the initial ask is often for an 8-year commitment. What happened to get him discharged so early? Because the Army won't say, and cited the Privacy Act and Department of Defense policy. Apparently, it prevents them from sharing information about misconduct, low-level employees, or characterization of service discharge. But are there any circumstances under which that information can be released, or does the Army have the unregulated right to protect people they can predict will likely commit grievous acts? People not mentally or otherwise well enough to be allowed amongst their ranks. Post-discharge, Grayson was arrested and charged with back-to-back DUIs in 2015, 2016. He pleaded guilty to both. But the reasons to keep him off the force don't end there. Grayson held 3 different part-time jobs at 3 different Illinois police departments. The Pawnee Police Department, the Kincaid Police Department, and Verdon Police Department between August 2020 and December 21. Why? 2021. Why? Was he hired in desperation during the pandemic? Why did he never last a year in any of these departments? He finally got a full-time job at the Auburn Police Department. Consistent with his part-time work, he didn't last a goddamn year. Okay? The same was true at the Logan County's Sheriff's Office, where he almost, but didn't make a year. He worked from them from May 2022 to April 2023. When he did make a full continuous year on the job with Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, where he worked from 2023 to July of 2024, it came at the expense of Sonia Macy's young life. He kept shifting around, getting kicked off of different police departments until he finally killed somebody. Shifting around, committing crimes as a police officer, race soldier. And, you know, Sonia Macy's death marks the latest instance of police killing a black person in their own home. She called for help because she thought there was a prowler. The police showed up, hostile from the gate, banging on her door. Okay? And telling her to hurry up and open the door. This woman called 911 for help. How often do they show up with this level of hostility to some Caucasian person's house that called for help? She's in a group of black people being murdered by the police for asking for help. Remember in Florida, a deputy shot and killed Senior Airman Roger Fortson after responding to what turned out to be a false report of an unspecified disturbance in his apartment. Fortson, 23, was shot in his own apartment May 3rd within seconds of opening his front door after Okaloosa County Sheriff's Deputy Eddie Duran responded aggressively to a report of domestic disturbance that a witness claims never existed at that location. Less than a week after Fortson was killed, the initial shooting narrative provided by Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office was definitely undermined by that witness, Fortson's girlfriend, who said the police responded to the wrong apartment. Body cam video footage shows Duran banging loudly on the apartment door when Fortson, possibly suspecting an intruder, answered the door while brandishing a legally owned gun that was facing down. This man was trained. He answered the door pointing the gun. Duran immediately opened fire and shot the young airman 6 times. It would take a whole month before Duran was fired. However, as of today, there have been no criminal charges brought in that shooting. And of course, there are other notable cases of police shooting and killing black people in their own homes. That include Botham John, who died after an off-duty Dallas cop mistook his apartment for hers and incorrectly suspected him as an intruder. I never believed that she mistook his apartment for hers. Never believed it. And what a farce that whole situation was when the Negropean judge came off the bench and hugged that murderous husband. And watch my language here. I almost said something. Atiana Jefferson. Remember Atiana Jefferson? She was shot through her own bedroom window by a Fort Worth police officer who didn't identify himself or give any warning. Looked in the window and shot and killed her. And there was Breonna Taylor. She was killed in a hail of bullets after police in Louisville executed a no-knock warrant in search of a suspect who was already in custody. Louisville. That situation was so corrupt, you have to research it to really see how corrupt that whole situation was. Because it didn't just include police brutality, police murders. What it was about was gentrification and the desire of those who wanted that area for profit to paint that whole area as crime-ridden. So the police were going in that area in Louisville and committing all kinds of crimes against the citizens in an effort to prove that this was a crime-ridden area. Okay. Now the officers, of course, who charged John and Jefferson were subsequently charged and convicted of murder. However, none of the police officers involved in Breonna Taylor's death have been held accountable. Welcome to America. In 2023, MAP and Police Violence, the organization that tracks police killings, cops killed 1,352 people last year. It's the highest recorded number that they've ever seen. Now, one of the egregious things that happened, which, you know, is not out of the norm, is that the cops initially claimed she committed suicide. Like I said, they went in Sonia Macy's home with hostility. Now, after they checked the perimeter and checked the outside of her home and there was no prowler or anyone trying to break in, that should have been the end of it. That should have been the end of the police call. But they insisted on coming in her home. They could have said all clear and went on. She was safe. But instead, they went in her home and hit her with a bunch of questions, okay, that did not have a lot to do with anything. It was like they were looking for some reason to escalate the situation. Anything. So she has a pot of water boiling on the stove. And Grayson directs her, hey, you might want to take that water off the stove. And when he sent her over there to get the water. Oh, I got her now. She's going to throw hot water on me. Yeah, that's what I'll say. And he immediately becomes, shows his hostility. Okay, put the pot down. And draws his gun. She said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. His response was, I'll shoot you in your effing face. She put the pot down and put her hands up, and he murdered her. He had every intention. And you know, I saw a couple of cops say, you know, that, yeah, they agreed this was murder. But, see, right there, as soon as you say but, you're going to say some racist crap, or you're going to try to rationalize his actions. Go to hell. How long are we going to continue with this? And yes, there's major marches in Chicago and other cities and what have you. Yet they're breaking records. It's 2024, 774 people already dead. The police are poised to break their own record. As of the day, they killed 56 more people than they had on this day in record-smashing year of 2023. They killed 38 more black people than they had on this day in the record-smashing year of 2023. With the 10th anniversary of the killing of teenager Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri on the horizon, black people continue are 3 times as likely to be killed by police as white people. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. And I was getting ready to move on to another subject, but I just wanted to go back and talk about how corrupt the police are and how they try to tamp this situation down. How cold-hearted they were. Sonia Macy's father says that the family were misled about her death and never told them that she was shot by the police. I think that's what you had found out on online. Okay, if it were not for the body cam footage, they would not have known what occurred. And initially, they tried to lie and say it was self-inflicted. But the body cam footage really showed how hateful and cold-hearted these people are. Because after she was murdered, the other cop said, well, let me get my medical care. Don't bother. She's done. Don't bother. Yeah. And they actually giggled about not having to waste their medical care. Now the narrative is to make her mentally ill. There's nothing wrong with her. Oh, well, she said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. You know, that shows a little mental illness when you do something like that. No, it doesn't. I don't care about what mythology you come to God. And since she was a Christian and she could see the demon standing before her, she called on her God for protection. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And that's what made him go off and murder her. Because he pulled his gun. How dare you? I'll shoot you in your effing face. And that's exactly what he did. She feared for her life. These are the people we're dealing with. So we can't call the cops when we feel we might have danger in our homes, because the likelihood is that you're calling the danger in. This is another reminder that even calling the police for help has deadly consequences for black people. WHGE 95.3 FM, The Open Eye. Time flies when you're having fun, huh? Or when you're doing something that's close to your heart. Erase the brainwashing, open our people's minds up. And some of you may have heard of Professor James Smalls. He was asked, why do you say Europeans never created a civilization? His response was, show me one. Show me a European civilization. Rome is not a civilization. Greece is not a civilization. You don't know a day in the history of Greece where there wasn't a war. You don't know a day in the history of Rome when there wasn't a war. Those are not civilizations. You know what a civilization is? Kemet. Rome couldn't do it for a day. America, pushing 250 years. 245 of those years they've been at war. Kemet went 3,000 years without a war. That's a civilization. Like I said, you don't know a day in the history of Rome there wasn't a war. Those are not civilizations. Those are death cults, war culture. They're not building anything. They're stealing from other people, borrowing from other people, and still carrying on this anti-human, anti-nature behavior of murdering, stealing to conquer and appropriate something that belonged to someone else that you could have gotten by just shaking their hand and making a deal. Professor James Smalls. You ever heard of the genome of Cheddar Man? 10,000 years ago in Britain, the first modern Brits had dark skin. And that's what the Cheddar Man DNA analysis reveals. So where the hell these people come from? Okay? When you don't have a history, what you do is you go steal other people's history and try to make it your own. Because here's the thing. We know that the white Nefertiti is fake. Her actual face is carved on her husband, Pharaoh Akhenaten's temple. Nefertiti was a black woman. There were no white humans in Europe until long after most of the blacks that were there fled from the monstrous, savage Neanderthals and returned to Africa. Some stayed and tried to tame the savages and mated with them and tried to civilize them. The Neanderthal human mutations unfortunately could not be civilized. They remained hunter-gatherers. The problem was the Neanderthal human mutants, like their Neanderthal ancestors, had calcified pineal glands and thus could not produce melanin. Thus, they were genetically inferior with weak immune systems, and they were susceptible to disease. And like most fur bearers, Neanderthals feared fire and ate raw meat. Eventually, they died off. Now, their Neanderthal human offspring bred a measure of the Neanderthal out and could no longer compete with wild animals in the manner their savage parents could, and they sought higher ground for protection. And many of them gathering in mountainous areas like the Caucasus Mountains. However, these offspring still had calcified pineal glands and could not produce melanin. They remained genetically inferior, and their taste for blood and savage nature has been barely tempered to this day. The Caucasian oppressed, murdered, and made war on each other for centuries. France and Britain had a 100-year war, a war that lasted 100 goddamn years. They murdered and made war on each other, especially on their women. Boiled them in pots, burned them alive. And they did this until they came into contact with other societies, and then they oppressed and murdered and made war on them. It is their ancestral bloodlust. It's in their DNA. I didn't say that. Your scientists said that. I got that from white scientists, European scientists. You check our DNA, there's no Neanderthal. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on Open Eye today. Hope you learned something, because I did. Bring it to you. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. This has been Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Thanks for joining us. All right. Thank you all for joining me. Hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I hope you learned something. And like I always tell you, global African supremacy, because the world was a much better place when the African ruled. Peace.